I'm Lisa Bennett, 31 years old, communications consultant, Manhattan-based, independent, and, according to my mother, still tragically alone. Today, I stood in front of the mirror in my Brooklyn apartment, smoothing out the soft emerald green satin of my dress. It hugged my body in all the right places. Classy, elegant, confident, or at least I hoped I looked that way. Inside, my nerves were crawling. My cousin Amanda's wedding was being held at the Astoria Garden Club, one of those fairy tale venues with chandeliers and real orchids flown in from somewhere tropical. My whole extended family would be there, and I would be walking in solo. I had debated not going. Really, the invitation had arrived 2 months ago, addressed formally, Lisa Bennett plus guest, like a gentle slap in the face. As if the universe wanted to remind me I'd just ended a 6-year relationship that should have ended at year 2. But I wasn't going to let them see me broken. The moment I walked in, conversations dipped. Aunt Margie, holding a mimosa with too much pulp, elbowed Uncle Ray. She came alone. I heard her say, not even bothering to whisper. Poor Lisa, such a shame. 31 and not even dating? I didn't flinch. I've trained myself not to. But inside, that old sting returned. From across the room, I caught Mom's sigh before I even saw her. She was standing with her signature glass of white wine and that soft look of pity she always wore like pearls. She'll never find someone, she said to no one and everyone. She works too much. Men don't like women like that. I smiled politely, nodded at a few people, and made my way to the bar. The bartender didn't even ask. Just handed me a Prosecco like he'd seen it a dozen times. The single woman's survival glass. You know that moment when your whole life plays in your head and you ask yourself, how did I end up here? That was me, perched on the edge of a cream velvet bar stool, nursing overpriced bubbles while watching Amanda, the cousin whose biggest accomplishment was marrying rich, bask in the glow of everyone's approval. Aunt Susan passed behind me and patted my shoulder. Still no +1? Well, you know, Lisa, some people just aren't meant to find love. But you've always had your career. I turned away, gripping the stem of my glass so tightly it might have snapped. I didn't always feel this way. There was a time I believed in partnership, in a future, in love. But my ex, Daniel, taught me how naive I'd been. 6 years of my life invested. 6. I stood by him through job loss, depression, career changes, and a whole year when he couldn't decide what he wanted. And then, when I finally landed a dream client and started getting noticed professionally, he couldn't handle it. You're too much now, he said. Too independent. I miss when you needed me. Translation: I don't like watching you become more than I am. He left a month later, for someone who got him better. And now, here I was, at a family wedding, surrounded by judgmental glances, forced smiles, and passive-aggressive pity. The ceremony was scheduled to start in 10 minutes. Most of the guests were already seated. I hadn't dared go inside yet. That's when Kimberly, my younger sister, approached. Perfect Kimberly. The one who married at 24, had 2 kids by 28, and lived in a house with a white fence in Connecticut like it was an HGTV ad. Hey, Lisa, she said, offering a smile that didn't quite meet her eyes. Mom's been worried sick you wouldn't show. You know how she gets. Here I am, I replied, sipping my Prosecco. Alone, though? Her eyes scanned the room dramatically. No, date? I raised an eyebrow. No, just me. Kimberly's lips curled into a smirk. Well, it's brave. Some women would have stayed home. I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled. That's what years of conditioning does. You master the art of silent endurance. See you inside? She chirped, turning on her nude heels. And then, the doors to the venue flew open. Heads turned, and a man walked in like he owned every molecule of air in the room. Tailored charcoal suit, clean lines, presence like thunder wrapped in silk. He was tall, confident, and magnetic. The kind of man who didn't just enter a room. He rewrote its atmosphere. My heart stuttered. Whispers spread like wildfire. Who is that? Is that? He looks like... Then he walked straight toward me. Straight. Toward... me. I blinked. And just before I could register what was happening, he took my hand gently, leaned in, and said loud enough for half the room to hear, "Let's not keep them waiting, sweetheart." And then he smiled. Like he knew exactly what he was doing. For a split second, I forgot how to breathe. His hand was warm, confident, and steady in mine. My first instinct was to pull away. But something in his expression, a mixture of quiet reassurance and deliberate intention, made me pause. "Let's not keep them waiting, sweetheart," he repeated, softer this time, just for me. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. All I could do was follow as he gently guided me away from the bar, across the polished wood floor, and straight into the center of the wedding venue. The room had fallen mostly silent. Guests shifted in their chairs. Heads swiveled. Whispers buzzed at low volume. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my mother's wine glass tilt midair, frozen in shock. Kimberly's jaw quite literally dropped. Amanda, still glowing in bridal perfection, stood near the arch, blinking in confusion. We stopped just inside the main aisle. And then he turned to face me, as if this were completely normal. As if we were just fashionably late to a wedding we were meant to attend together. I finally found my voice. Who are you?" He leaned in, speaking just beneath the volume of the whispers surrounding us. "Play along. Just for a few minutes. I'll explain everything." I promise I stared into his face. Square jaw, piercing gray-blue eyes, not a trace of hesitation. He looked like someone who had never fumbled a decision in his life. And for reasons I still can't explain, I nodded. He led me to the second row, where a few seats had been marked as reserved. The usher didn't even question it. The man nodded politely, and we were seated. Silence still lingered in the air. And then, almost on cue, the music resumed. Amanda's entrance music. Canon in D, because of course, wafted from the quartet, and the ceremony continued. I barely registered the words exchanged at the altar. My heart was pounding, my mind racing. I turned slightly toward him, whispering through clenched teeth. "Are you some kind of wedding crasher?" A smile tugged at the edge of his mouth. "Technically, no, I was invited. I just didn't RSVP." "Do I know you?" "No," he said. "But I know you, Lisa." I froze. "What?" "I recognized you the moment I walked in. You gave a keynote at the New York Brand Strategy Summit last October. Emotional clarity and crisis communication. You crushed it." I blinked, stunned. "You were there?" "In the front row." Of course, that conference was the one thing I'd truly been proud of in the last 2 years. I'd spoken in front of 500 people, and I remembered a man in the front row. Thought he looked vaguely familiar, but in the moment, I chalked it up to nerves. "And you just decided to walk into a wedding and pretend to be my date?" I asked. He leaned in again. "I heard your sister at the bar, the way she spoke about you. I don't like bullies, so I figured maybe today you could use someone in your corner." Before I could respond, the officiant said, "You may now kiss the bride." And polite applause spread through the room. I clapped numbly, my thoughts still trying to catch up to what had just happened. This stranger, this very attractive, well-dressed stranger, had walked into a social battlefield and picked a side. Mine. As the ceremony ended and people began filing out toward the reception hall, I whispered, "Okay, I'm going to need more than a mysterious hero complex. Who are you, really?" He stood and offered his arm. Sebastian Cole." The name hit me like a freight train. "You're the Sebastian Cole?" "Depends who you ask," he said with a wink. I nearly tripped over my heels. Sebastian Cole, tech entrepreneur, billionaire founder of Cole Innovations, regular on Forbes' Under 40 to Watch list. That Sebastian Cole. I remembered seeing his face on a cover once while waiting at a newsstand. The article headline had said something about him being brilliant, elusive, and impossibly private. "And you just happened to be at my cousin's wedding?" He grinned. "Amanda's fiancé works for one of my subsidiaries. We had lunch last month, and he mentioned the wedding. When I heard the venue, I figured I might stop by and say a quick hello. Why didn't you tell anyone you were coming?" He shrugged. "I don't do well with a lot of attention or expectations, and I was going to leave until I saw you." We were at the edge of the ballroom now. The doors to the reception area stood open, revealing candlelit tables, a champagne tower, and guests gathering in curious clusters. Sebastian looked down at me. "I can disappear right now if you want. Pretend none of this happened." I paused. The voices of judgment still echoed in my mind. My mother's sigh, Kimberly's smirk, Aunt Margie's commentary. Or I could walk in with Sebastian Cole. "Let's not keep them waiting," I said quietly, echoing his earlier words. His smile widened. And together, we stepped into the ballroom, arm in arm under the stunned gazes of everyone who'd ever written me off. The moment we stepped into the ballroom, you could feel the air shift, not in a cinematic way, with gasps and dramatic music, but in that real way, when people suddenly stop mid-sentence and try to pretend they weren't just talking about you. Everyone was staring. My family, Amanda's bridesmaids, even the staff behind the buffet. And Sebastian? He didn't flinch. He owned the moment like it was another boardroom meeting. Calm, composed, and completely unbothered by the sea of eyes now glued to us. The wedding planner blinked twice when she saw us. She recovered quickly, gesturing toward the seating chart. "Mr. Cole, we hadn't accounted for—" Sebastian gave her a polite nod. "Don't worry, Lisa and I will take care of it." He leaned toward me. "Do you know where they put you?" I bit the inside of my cheek. I was at table 19, the singles table, with cousin Donnie, my divorced great uncle, and a girl who's in high school. "Not ideal," he said dryly. He scanned the room until his eyes landed on Amanda's father, Uncle Gerald, who was deep in conversation near the head table. Sebastian gave him a slight nod. Gerald's eyes widened, and he motioned quickly to the wedding planner. Within seconds, someone was pulling an extra chair to a half-empty table near the front. VIP territory. And just like that, I was moved. Social upgrade complete. Sebastian pulled my chair out for me. "After you, Ms. Bennett." I sat down slowly, still processing the absurdity of the moment. He took the seat beside me, adjusted his cufflinks, and leaned back like he belonged there. This man had turned a minefield of humiliation into a red carpet, and I hadn't even had a chance to understand why. "So," I said, turning slightly toward him, "let's go back to this whole play-along idea. How far are we taking this?" He considered that. "I figured we improvise, as long as you're comfortable. You do realize my entire family is going to interrogate you tonight?" His lips curved. "I've handled venture capital boards and congressional tech hearings. I think I can handle your Aunt Margie." I almost laughed, until I saw Kimberly approaching. She was smiling, but it didn't reach her eyes. Her gaze ping-ponged between me and Sebastian, like she was watching a tennis match she hadn't been invited to. "Well, hello, stranger," she purred, clearly addressing him. "You must be Lisa's guest?" Sebastian stood politely and extended a hand. "Sebastian Cole, pleasure to meet you." Kimberly's eyes flickered. "Cole, that's a familiar name." He smiled. "I get that a lot." She turned to me, expression faux casual. "You never mentioned you were dating anyone, Lisa?" I shrugged. "We've been keeping it low-key." She tilted her head. "How did you two meet?" Sebastian didn't miss a beat. At the New York Brand Strategy Summit last fall, Lisa was a keynote speaker. Kimberly's eyebrows lifted. "Oh?" "I was captivated," he said, locking eyes with me. Her approach to crisis communication was razor-sharp. I introduced myself afterward and convinced her to grab a drink. Been trying to keep up with her ever since. My cheeks flushed. The worst part? It didn't feel like an act. "Well," Kimberly said, voice tightening, "I hope you have a strong backbone. Lisa's always been intense." Sebastian's smile sharpened just a little. "I admire intensity. It's usually a sign of someone who knows what they want." I almost wanted to high-five him. Kimberly blinked, clearly not used to being outmaneuvered in casual conversation. "I'm sure we'll talk more later," she said coolly before turning on her heel. When she was out of earshot, I exhaled slowly. "You didn't have to do that." "Do what?" "Defend me. Make it sound like I'm someone worth being proud of." He looked at me, and for the first time, his smile softened. "I didn't make anything up, Lisa. Everything I said was true." The band started playing something jazzy in the background, and dinner began. Between bites of seared salmon and risotto, we fell into conversation. Real conversation. He asked about my job, how I'd built my freelance communications business after walking away from the PR agency world. I told him about clients who tried to underpay, media crises I'd diffused, and that moment I knew I'd made the right decision. Sitting alone on my floor at midnight, pizza in one hand, approval email in the other. And he listened. Really listened. He told me about his company, how Cole Innovations started in a college dorm room, how his father didn't speak to him for a year after he dropped out, how success came quickly, but peace took much longer. And just like that, the man in the suit became someone real, human, fallible. Halfway through dessert, Sebastian leaned in and said, "By the way, you've got at least 4 people staring at you like they've just realized you're not invisible." I looked around. He wasn't wrong. Kimberly was watching. So was Aunt Margie. And my mom, who'd spent the last decade lamenting my dating life, was now whispering behind her napkin like I'd become royalty overnight. "They're shocked," I said quietly. "They're seeing a version of me they didn't think existed." Sebastian touched my hand lightly. Maybe it's time they met the real version. For the first time in years, I wasn't shrinking to fit their comfort. I was finally expanding into my own story. Later that evening, after the cake had been cut and the first dances were over, the music shifted into something slow and sweeping. The lights dimmed to a golden glow, and couples began migrating to the dance floor like moths to warm light. Sebastian stood and extended his hand. "Shall we?" I hesitated, not because I didn't want to, but because it had been years since I danced with someone who looked at me like I mattered. Still, I slid my hand into his and let him lead me to the floor. The band played something classic. Frank Sinatra, I think, but I barely registered the lyrics. All I could focus on was the feel of his hand at my waist, the way his other hand held mine like it was the most natural thing in the world. He wasn't flashy or showy. He just moved with quiet confidence. We found a rhythm almost immediately. A slow, easy back and forth that somehow felt like we'd done this before. "You're surprisingly good at this," I said, breaking the silence. He chuckled. "Mandatory lessons at boarding school. My mother believed every gentleman should know how to waltz and how to apologize properly." "Did she teach you the latter too?" "She tried," he said, his smile faltering for the first time all evening. We danced in silence for a few more seconds. Then I asked, "Do you always do this?" "Do what?" "Rescue random women at weddings?" He looked down at me. "Only when they look like they're about to combust from emotional damage." I laughed despite myself. "That obvious?" He nodded, unashamed. "You walked in with your spine straight, chin up, pretending not to notice the dozens of eyes dissecting you. That takes guts." "It takes practice," I corrected. We kept moving. I felt a twinge in my chest, the kind of ache that comes when someone sees you more clearly than you're ready for. "I've spent most of my adult life trying to prove something to my family," I admitted. "That I'm not broken because I didn't get married by 28. That I'm not lesser because I chose career over kids. But no matter how much I achieve, I'm still poor Lisa in their eyes." Sebastian didn't respond right away. He just kept leading the dance, giving me time to breathe through the emotion behind my words. Then, softly, he said, "They're wrong, you know. Every word they've ever said about you that made you feel small, that's their fear talking, not truth." I looked up, surprised at the firmness in his voice. "You can always tell when people aren't comfortable with someone who knows who they are," he added. Before I could respond, someone tapped him on the shoulder. It was Amanda's new husband, Jason, I think. He looked nervous, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "Sorry to interrupt. Sebastian, can I borrow you for a second? Something with the payment system for the venue. We're locked out of the app and—" Sebastian gave me an apologetic glance. "Business emergencies follow me everywhere." He kissed my hand, a move that would have felt corny from anyone else, and turned to go with Jason. As I walked off the dance floor, I found myself face to face with my mother. She held a nearly empty glass of Chardonnay and a purse clutched tightly under one arm. Her eyes scanned me from head to toe. "Well," she said slowly, "that was quite the performance." I blinked. "Excuse me?" "Sebastian Cole?" she said, tone skeptical. "I Googled him during dinner. Do you really expect us to believe you're dating one of the most private men in America? You've never mentioned him. Not once. Because I don't report my love life to the family gossip circle." Her eyebrows rose. "So he's real?" I folded my arms. "Yes, Mom, he's real." She sighed like I'd disappointed her by breathing. "Just be careful, Lisa. Men like that, they don't settle down with women like you." I felt the words like a slap. Women like me. She meant ordinary, real, flawed. "I think we're done with this conversation," I said, turning away before she could see the tears threatening to surface. I stepped out onto the patio for air. The night had cooled, the air crisp with the scent of autumn. A string of white lights twinkled above, and for a few blessed minutes, I was alone. Until Kimberly appeared beside me, arms crossed. "Well," she said, voice light but barbed. "Congratulations." I said nothing. "He seems very convincing," she continued. "You even had Aunt Margie believing it." I turned to face her. "Do you ever get tired of this? The snide comments, the constant digs. What exactly do you gain from making me feel small?" Kimberly rolled her eyes. "Oh, please, don't play the victim." "I'm not playing anything," I said quietly. "I'm just done shrinking so you can shine." For once, she didn't have a comeback. Sebastian reappeared then, walking onto the patio like a man who belonged everywhere. He slipped an arm around my waist and kissed the side of my head. "You okay?" he asked softly. I nodded, and for the first time in years, I realized I meant it. We re-entered the ballroom just as the DJ invited everyone to the dance floor for what he called a moment of celebration for all the couples in the room. Sebastian kept his arm casually around me, his body warm against mine. We didn't dance this time. We just watched from the edge of the floor as couples twirled and laughed and leaned into each other like they'd known love all their lives. I watched them, feeling a complicated swirl of emotions, longing, admiration, and something dangerously close to envy. Sebastian leaned in. "What are you thinking?" "That this is the kind of night I usually spend alone," I admitted, "and that I don't know how to trust what's happening right now." He studied me for a moment. "It doesn't have to be anything more than what it is." "And what is it?" I asked. He paused. Two people who saw something in each other and decided not to ignore it. We were interrupted by Aunt Margie, who approached holding a flute of champagne and wearing her usual cloud of perfume. "Well, well, well," she said, with a tone that suggested she thought she'd caught us mid-scheme. "Lisa, you didn't tell us you were dating someone quite so accomplished." Sebastian turned on the charm. "I'm the lucky one, actually. Lisa's brilliance is what caught my eye first. I've been trying to keep up ever since." Aunt Margie's eyes narrowed, clearly thrown. "How long have you two been— an item?" "About 3 months," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Really?" she asked, too brightly. Interesting that no one in the family had any idea. especially since Lisa always said she wanted to take her time before getting serious again. After Daniel, of course. I stiffened at the mention of his name. Sebastian's eyes flicked to me for a brief second, then back to Margie. "Some connections don't operate on timelines," he said gently. "They either work or they don't." "Well," Aunt Margie said, defeated but unwilling to show it, "we'll see how long this one lasts." As she floated away, I exhaled. She's been like that since I was 12. Sebastian looked at me carefully. "Can I ask you something?" I nodded. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I wasn't completely honest about how I knew you'd be here tonight." I froze. "What do you mean?" He handed me the paper. I opened it slowly, fingers trembling. It was a printed guest list, Amanda's, on official wedding letterhead. My name circled in red ink. "I didn't just show up by coincidence," he admitted. "Jason, Amanda's husband, works at one of my firms. We had lunch last week. He mentioned the wedding and your name came up. He mentioned you were coming alone." My stomach dropped. "So what? This was some kind of mission?" "No," he said quickly. "Not like that. When I heard your name, it rang a bell. I remembered the conference. I remembered how you spoke, how confident and sharp you were. I'd meant to reach out back then, but the timing never worked. When I realized you'd be here, I thought maybe I'd get a second chance." "A second chance to what?" I asked, voice low. "To introduce myself, to meet you without a stage between us." I folded the list. "And the dramatic entrance?" He smiled sheepishly. "Okay, I didn't plan that. I was going to leave, actually. I got cold feet. But then I saw your mom. I overheard what she said." He didn't need to repeat it. I knew the exact line. "Poor thing, she'll never find someone." "I saw your face, and I just walked in," he said. "It was impulsive and probably stupid, but not fake." I sat down on the edge of a chair, trying to process everything. "It's a lot, I know," he said. "But nothing I told you tonight was a lie. I didn't plan on pretending. I planned on asking you for coffee. Somehow it turned into this." "And what is this, Sebastian?" I asked, looking up at him. "Because it feels like I'm not sure what's real anymore." He crouched beside me. "This is real," he said. "At least for me. The way I've watched you hold yourself tonight, graceful, self-possessed, funny, you've handled a room full of judgment with more class than I've seen from board members twice your age." My heart thudded in my chest. Part of me wanted to believe him. The other part remembered how quickly affection could be manufactured. I'd been tricked before, loved by people who didn't mean it, believed in relationships that were built on control, not connection. Before I could respond, Kimberly appeared again, this time with that look on her face. The one that said she knew something I didn't. "Hey, Lisa," she said, all false sweetness. "You've got a moment? I think you should come see something." Sebastian stood. "We're kind of in the middle of something." "It'll only take a second," she interrupted. "Really, Lisa, you'll want to see this." I followed her reluctantly, heart pounding, gut sinking. She led me through the hallway toward the coat check area, then turned abruptly and faced me. "You're going to hate me," she said, pulling out her phone. "What is this?" She opened a tab on Safari, a news article. "Billionaire Sebastian Cole makes surprise appearance at private event, spotted with unidentified woman at family wedding." A photo, from tonight, of me and Sebastian at the bar. "What is this?" I whispered. Kimberly shrugged. "Guess you weren't as private as you thought." I looked at the timestamp. 20 minutes ago, someone had leaked it. My chest tightened. "Why are you showing me this?" Her expression turned sharp. "Because you should ask yourself something, Lisa. Was this about you, or about the story?" My mind reeled. Had I just been part of a well-orchestrated narrative? Or worse, a headline. I stood in that dim hallway, staring at the photo on Kimberly's phone. There I was, mid-laugh, a champagne glass in hand with Sebastian Cole's arm around my waist. And below it, billionaire makes surprise appearance at private NYC wedding. Unidentified woman may be a new mystery partner. And a few speculative headlines beneath that. My stomach turned. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked again, voice colder now. Kimberly tilted her head, her voice calm and saccharine. "Because you needed to know. You've been so wrapped up in your Cinderella moment, I thought you deserved to see what it looks like from the outside." "You think he did this?" I asked, breath catching. "That he staged this? For what? Attention?" Kimberly shrugged, but there was something gleaming in her eyes. "All I'm saying is, maybe ask yourself why someone like him would suddenly want to play your boyfriend at a wedding. In front of cameras. On the same weekend his new tech deal launches. Think about it." I walked away before I said something I'd regret. Back in the ballroom, the music was louder, the dancing more chaotic, but I could only see one face in the crowd. Sebastian. He was standing near the bar, scrolling through his phone. His brow furrowed, jaw tight. He'd seen it too. I walked straight up to him. "We need to talk, now." He looked up, registering my expression instantly. "Lisa? Did you know this would happen?" "No," he said firmly. "Not like this. But you did know there was a chance someone might see us. Might post something." "Yes," he admitted. "But I didn't think it would happen so fast. And I didn't plan it. That photo? That leak? Not me." "Then who?" I asked. Because I've spent this entire night defending something I wasn't even sure was real. And now I find myself in a tabloid captioned as unidentified woman, like I'm part of some PR stunt. "I'm sorry," he said, and he meant it. I could see it in his eyes. "But this doesn't work for me," I said quietly. "I can't be someone's moment. I've spent too many years being an afterthought, a stepping stone, or a placeholder. If this was a story for you, even a good one, I don't want it." Sebastian stepped forward. "Lisa, I didn't come here for publicity. I came here because I remembered a woman who stood on a stage and said things that made me rethink how I communicate with the world. Because when Jason mentioned your name, something clicked, and I thought, maybe that moment in October wasn't supposed to be the end of it." I swallowed, hard. "But you didn't give me a choice. You stepped into my life without asking. You walked in, hand outstretched, and I followed you, because I was desperate not to feel small." His voice softened. "You were never small." "I know that now," I said. "But I had to learn it the hard way." He nodded, stepping back. "If you ask me to leave, I will. But I hope you won't. I didn't fake what I felt tonight, Lisa. Not the way I looked at you. Not the way we danced. And definitely not the way I'll remember this moment." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. So he turned, slow and sure, and walked out of the ballroom. And just like that, the moment ended. I didn't cry. I didn't chase him. I just stood there, strangely calm, as if something inside me had finally clicked into place. I left an hour later, with no dramatic farewell, no goodbyes. Just a quiet walk out into the cool New York night. The air tasted like endings. And maybe, just maybe, new beginnings too. 3 weeks passed. No texts, no calls. I got back to work. Signed a new client. Reorganized my apartment. Went on a solo hike upstate and cried at the top of a trail for no particular reason other than knowing I could. Then one Thursday morning, a small package arrived at my office. No return address. Inside was a single object. A paperback book with a worn spine. Daring Greatly by Brené Brown. Tucked inside was a handwritten note. "Because you did. S." I stared at it for a long time, unsure whether to laugh or cry. In the end, I did both. 2 months later, we crossed paths again. Not planned, not staged. I was speaking at another conference, this time in Chicago. Afterward, I was answering questions at the edge of the stage when I saw him in the crowd. No suit, no cameras, just jeans, a jacket, and that same look in his eyes. When the crowd dispersed, he walked up and said, "Coffee this time?" I nodded. No pretending. He smiled. No headlines. And this time, when I reached for his hand, it was on my terms. 6 months later, I brought him to another family wedding. But this time, no performance, no drama. Just us. Two people who had learned to stop apologizing for who they were. And when my mother whispered, "You look happy," I simply said, "I am." Because I was. Not because of him, but because somewhere along the way I stopped waiting to be chosen. And finally chose myself.